It's another Mailbag Monday here on the Athletic Football Show. Another bunch of very good questions. Excited to dig into these. Beller, let's waste no time. Let's get to it.
You know, we said Thaddeus Wazowitz was going to push us into a full episode, and we just decided, you know what? This is just an awesome question. Let's get to it. So, Thaddeus, you're back, and you've got our first question on this mailbag, so let's get to it. We're going on 2 years now that I just can't believe what I'm hearing on the Ravens. Mays mentioned putting his thoughts together for this on a future pod, but here's what I don't get. Eric DeCosta started in 2019, so after Lamar. What are his good moves or draft wins? What would you think about his moves in totality if it said Jags next to his name instead of Ravens? What has he done to build around Lamar, who is very clearly the centerpiece of the franchise and offense? And if your main hits are on defense and they lead to a bad defense, are they actually hits? Very thoughtful question there from Thaddeus. So, Robert, why don't you get us started here?
Couple different thoughts here. We were going to do this as a full show. We decided not to do it for a couple different reasons. The Ravens are the reason we wanted to do it as a full show, and so we felt this was just a little bit easier and cleaner to answer it in this format. My answer is this. I think that if you look at the Ravens draft history since 2019, there are some drafts that are frustrating. There's some drafts that are disappointing, right? Like the 2020 draft with Patrick Queen and J.K. Dobbins, we point to that, and it's like, well, neither of those guys are currently contributors for the Ravens. But if you look at the numbers, purely the numbers since 2019, not only are the Ravens not a bad drafting team, they are number one in approximate value per draft pick since 2019. Number one. And so I know that there haven't been as many like 4th, 5th round hits for the Ravens that have turned into like really good pass rushers as in years past. But if you look at these drafts from 2019, starting in 2019, okay, Marquise Brown didn't end up becoming a long-term piece of the Ravens. They traded him for real draft capital on draft day to the Cardinals. That is a hit. Ben Powers did not get a second contract with the Ravens. He got paid a ton of money by another team. That is a good draft pick in the 4th round. In 2020, Patrick Queen was still a guy who got a second contract from another team. J.K. Dobbins had huge injury issues. I also think this conversation changes so much if Madubuike plays.
Yes.
We are forgetting totally. Madubuike as part of this overall thing. Like finding a player like Madubuike in the 3rd round, if he would have stayed healthy, I think changes this discussion in a lot of ways. Even the 2021 draft, like Bateman and Odafe Owe, neither of them became stars for the Ravens, but they're both contributing pieces. Brandon Stevens was the 3rd round pick in that draft, who was a player that played a decent amount of snaps for the Ravens. He was a contributor for the Ravens. He got another contract. And then the other part of this, beyond just the quality of drafts over that time and the fact that they're consistently finding, either for them or other people, 2 to 3 contributors in those drafts, the 2022 draft, finding 2 elite players in the 1st round of the draft, that just doesn't really happen. And in that same draft, they got Travis Jones in the 3rd round and Isaiah Likely in the 4th round. Like, this is still a team that is drafting very well. And I think to the last point, this idea of if your main hits are on defense and they lead to a bad defense, that's why Jesse Minter is the head coach of the Ravens right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he's the head coach of the Ravens.
And also, if we're doing this like back since 2019, they've mostly had good defenses. Like through that stretch, last year was a little bit of an exception, but like they have mostly had good hits. And I think what I would say about the defense thing specifically is like the hits are the hits. Those guys are good. The trade for Roquan Smith, I think Nate Wiggins is a good player. Malachi Starks was really good last year. Madubuike, Travis Jones, like those guys are all hits. The problem is like it's more of a stars and scrubs like defensive roster than it is used to being because they've missed on all the pass rushers that they've swung at mostly. You know, Owe was okay, but then obviously they end up not getting the most out of him with Orr, end up trading him. But almost all the other guys they've tried to draft at that position have not been good. Linebacker 2 has been a problem recently since Patrick Queen has been gone. And so it's more like let's say the worst 4 starters on the Ravens defense are just worse now than they were, because I do think that in previous draft classes, like they were better at finding 4th and 5th round defensive linemen more consistently or they had a linebacker in the hopper that was ready to come up and play 2 starting years for them. Like, I think that element is gone, but like they still find really good players consistently. Just the bottom end of the roster has been a little bit worse.
But that just makes it like a normal team.
Right, exactly, yes.
Okay, I'm glad you said that though, Robert, because I think that's the crux of this, and I fall more with Thaddeus than I do with y'all. I think the truth is probably somewhere in between, and I think the problem is the Ravens are perfectly fine. They've drafted perfectly fine. They've found some good players. They've had some hits and some misses. They've had some disappointing drafts. I think the issue arises where people talk about them like draft gods, and like every single year they wait for the Alabama guy to fall to them in the mid 40s, or like they wait for the guy, the edge rusher with obvious character concerns falls to them at 45, and you're like, there go the Ravens doing this crazy Ravens thing, or like they did it with Kyle Hamilton. That's obviously a really good example. But they get a lot of credit for that, and the results don't back it up as much as the word-of-mouth reputation suggests. That would be my point. And one thing I would like to say is I think their strategy, it's in direct conflict with each other, because one thing that makes the Ravens such a enticing, fun drafting team, they do the comp pick game better than anybody in the NFL. They've had 20 since 2019. That's really cool, and you wind up with extra thirds, extra fourths. I think they have 2 extra fifths this year, and that's very fun. But how do you get comp picks? You let your good players leave. And to your point, Robert, so there's so many success stories out of Baltimore. Tyler Linderbaum, Patrick Queen, J.K. Dobbins, Adafe Owe, Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kohler. These are good players who, when you look through the Ravens draft history, you say, oh, but he's not helping the Ravens anymore. And so those two things are in direct conflict with each other, where to play the comp pick game as well as they want to, they have to let talented players walk out the door. So I think their own strategy is going to keep their draft history from looking as good as you want it to.
I think they've done a poor job relatively compared to previous eras of this team of replacing those guys in the same way, right? And I think that's been the problem, is that, like, Daniel Falalele wasn't quite as good as Ben Powers was as a 4th-round pick that is sliding in as an interior offensive lineman replacement. I think they've been worse at filling in the depth pieces in that way. But I'll say this, if the Ravens aren't a good drafting team, who is? Even since 2019. Like, every team has a ton of misses, and I think we still talk about them as good drafting teams. Like, you look at a team like the Lions, right? Like, Josh Pascal was the 46th pick in the 2022 draft, and you even like the 2024 draft, where Terrion Arnold was a 1st-round pick, and then Ennis Rakestraw, Giovanni Manu in the 4th round. There's a chance that the 2024 draft is just a no-go for the Lions, and a lot of these other teams, like the Lions, are the team I think a lot of people would point to. The Ravens didn't have the benefit of picking 7th and 2nd in any drafts over the last 10 years. They're picking in the 20s every single year, or in the teens at worst. And so when you consider where they're drafting, the expected returns on the players, they're still in the conversation as one of the best drafting teams in the NFL, even if some of the hallmarks of who the Ravens have been over the last 10 years, 15 years, when it comes to those 4th and 5th round guys, have not been quite as strong in the last 5 as they had been previously.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. And I don't think there's really a problem here, as long as we are acknowledging that they're just as flawed as everybody else. And I think, I'm guessing, and just trying to keep tabs on what fans say and popular opinion, I think the frustration comes where sometimes you talk about the Ravens like they do no wrong, and they clearly do wrong. And one other point that I would just want to bring up, I was thinking I'd be curious for y'all's list of like the best 4 or 5 Ravens right now, like the best Baltimore Ravens players. Like, my list is Lamar, Kyle Hamilton, Derrick Henry, and Roquan Smith.
Yes.
Right?
Madubuike, if he's healthy, like, it is certainly up there. But
I'll give you Madubuike.
It's complicated. Yeah.
If Madubuike is healthy, that's 2 out of 5 that Eric DeCosta drafted himself. And I mean, like, they acquired Roquan Smith. You get credit for that. That's fine. But
you pay a premium to do that, though, right? Like, by giving him the pick and the contract, you're paying the sticker price for him, right? Like, it's a shrewd move in the sense that you got a good player, but you got no value out of that player when it comes to the market. It's not the same as drafting a guy. You can't just say we use that 2nd-round pick on Roquan Smith. You did not.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of the Ravens' best players, and I think that's a good point, Derek. I really like Nate Wiggins. Malachi Starks looks good after 1 year, so maybe we'll change our tunes. But right now, I think the majority of the Ravens' best players are guys that Eric DeCosta did not draft himself and bring into the organization himself, and I think that's worth pointing out.
Yeah, they've definitely taken a step back. There's no denying that, and that's why you have to do something like the Trey Hendrickson signing in ways that you wouldn't before, or like the Max Crosby trade. But I still think when you stack it up to the rest of the league, they are still a very good above average drafting team. And it's important also to keep that in the back of your mind as we have this discussion. All right, Bella, what's the next one?
Alex Mandrick has our next question. Alex asks, I really enjoyed, or I guess he says to start this, I really enjoyed the discussion you had recently about the experience of quarterbacks in college and the desire to use a first-round draft pick on a quarterback who wasn't the clear-cut starter by year 2 at their school. I recently read The Athletic's 2026 Draft Fits We Love, and Nick Baumgardner wrote about Caden McDonald, defensive tackle from Ohio State. In his writing, he mentioned that McDonald, who is consistently mocked as a first-round pick, was a one-season starter and hasn't put it all together yet. Sounds to me a little bit like Ty Simpson. So, which positions would you be most okay with a first-round pick having limited experience in college? And which positions do you think experience and playing time is vital for? Derrik, you take this one first.
I think this is really good. And I think to me, it mostly comes down to like, if we're talking about pure starting experience, I think the rotation positions, I don't care if you were only a one-year starter. Defensive line, defensive end, wide receiver, running back, because you're going to get reps. Like, you might not be the starter, but you're getting serious reps. You're getting serious, even practice reps, if you're one of those guys who's going to be some sort of contributor on game day. And like McDonald was not a starter in 2024. He played a decent amount for Ohio State in 2024. He was just starting behind, and I think this is another important part of the McDonald thing versus Simpson. He was starting behind Tyleik Williams, also a first-round pick, who was like a really, really good, who was pretty solid as a NFL rookie. And so I think there's that element of it. And then I think on the flip side, positions where I would be a little bit more dubious and probably do want to see you play more than 1 year of starting. Offensive line, because again, that's not really a rotation position. Like, you're either the starter or you're not. And then even though linebacker and safety can be positions where you could get on the field, you could rotate in a little bit, maybe guys are just taking reps off, whatever it's going to be. Those are, because they're such mental positions, I would like you to get a little bit more reps and have more starting experience.
It's funny that I took this very similarly with the rotation players, but almost for a different reason. I just think that if you have a guy who's inexperienced as a defensive lineman, you can work him in and get him experience in a way where it's the right blend of development and instant contribution, right? Like, you're not going to have an offensive tackle that's a one-year starter in college and then plays 12 snaps a game for you in the NFL if you draft him in the first round. That's just not going to happen. And so I think defensive line is a good one for that reason. The only thing I'd push back on when it comes to receivers is that we have so much statistical history about breakout age among receivers and how much it matters. Where if you are if it takes you till your age 22 season to have a productive year in college, that is often a red flag for what you're going to be in the NFL. And so I think that's the one thing I would throw out where, like, yes, it is a rotational position, but we do want to see, for the most part, based on history, early contributions from guys at those positions specifically.
Yeah, my answer comes down pretty exclusively on age. And going back to the Ty Simpson question, the reason Ty only having 1 year as a starter and not winning that quarterback battle earlier, the reason it doesn't bother me as much is because in my mind, we're talking about him as a second-round pick. That would give me a lot of hesitation as a first-round pick. And I think it's the same thing across the board. If you've started 1 year at tackle, offensive tackle in college, but you're 21 years old, that bothers me a hell of a lot less than if you're 24 and you've been at your program for 3 to 5 years and you started one season for some reason. And I think it's a good point. I agree with Derrik. Like, the more cerebral the position, the more I'm curious about this. Like, linebacker comes to mind because it's like, are you the run and hit guy who is only worried about athleticism and just like see ball, get ball? Do you have any experience like getting the play call and getting things right and understanding what you're looking at? And if that's my idea for what you're going to be, are you going to be completely flummoxed by it? Like, do I have to teach you scheme and how to play the position and stuff like that? So the more mental responsibility of the position, the more I'm probably looking at stuff like that.
The downside matters to me too. Right? Like, if you have a safety that has never played and he's going to have to be a day one starter for you because you drafted him in the first round, the downside of that guy learning on the job is extremely real. The downside of a defensive lineman learning on the job in a similar way, it just doesn't really exist. Like, he doesn't produce for you, but like, all right, he didn't produce for you on 12 plays. If you have a safety that you're trying to ease in that's like a 21-year-old freak but is inexperienced, you could lose games. Like, that's a real thing that can happen because he had to learn on the job.
Yeah, he will give up touchdowns for you. And like, that's going to ruin your game in a way that, like, the defensive end, it might hurt you, but it's not going to kill you. The only thing I would say about the receivers, the breakout age thing is a good point, which I think is why the 1 year of starting, it's different when we're talking about like Xavier Legette, right? Who was like 23 years old. It takes him until year 5 to really break out versus like Jamison Williams, who's trapped behind a bunch of other first-round picks at Ohio State, transfers to Alabama, is a 1 year starter at 21 years old, really, really good. And so that, to me, like,
Context
the
matters
age
here in a
matters.
big way.
Totally.
All right, Bauer, what's the next one?
John Dykes asked the next question. John says, is it a pure coincidence that we have potentially 2 first-round edge prospects that have historically short arms, including one potentially going top 5? If it's not a coincidence, is the position changing at the college level to allow shorter arm players to succeed, and will this trend eventually translate to the NFL? Dave, you're up first.
I love the question, John, and I love that you're thinking ahead and trying to spin this forward, and you might be onto something. I'm more inclined to say I'd like to see more evidence that this is a trend before I take it as one. And just for the entirety of the context I went through, now we have the beast, which makes our lives so much easier. Dane has 46 edges with some sort of grade ranging from 1 to priority free agent, all the way on down to like after the 7th round. 44 of them have longer arms than Bane and Cassius Howell. And then of the guys that have a day 1 or day 2 grade, there's 16. So if you take out Bane and Howell, 13 of those 14 guys have a full 1.5 inches of arm length on Ruben Bane and Cassius Howell. The one exception is R. Mason Thomas, who's at 31 3/4. So still longer, but not quite as much longer. And so I look at it and just think the overwhelming majority of these guys meet the thresholds you want them to. And it's tricky with college prospects, like measurements for seniors who elect to measure, like rising seniors. So like this year's juniors who are staying in school, who elect to measure, can measure over the summer, and the scouting services will have some of that information. But for the vast majority of these guys, it doesn't become public knowledge for us until like the Senior Bowl and the Combine. So it's possible that there's going to be some more guys like this coming down the line, but I need to see it before I'm worrying about it becoming a trend.
I also think it's worth mentioning that we've acknowledged that the Combine measurements have been weird over the last 2 years. Like, they've been shorter than they have been in previous seasons, and that started in 2025. If you look at the 2024 Combine, there were no players with shorter than 32-inch arms. There was one player who was below 32.5 inches.
Mm-hmm.
This year, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 players below 32.5 inches. I think it's how they're measuring it is also playing into this. I think it's more coincidental, and the fact that the last 2 years something has been going on with the arm lengths that we probably need to inspect.
It kind of is a little bit of everything. There is whatever was going on with the measurements. Everybody is a little bit shorter than they used to be, which I think is part of it. I do think, though, I don't have like exact numbers for this, but I was kind of toying around on Mock Draftable, which is a really good resource for stuff like this.
That's right. I just got that.
Right. And if you look at like 1999 to like 2010, there really are not that many edge rushers with arms under like 32.5. Whereas if you go from like 2011 through 2025, whatever it's going to be, there are more guys who are 32.5 and under. But I don't think that is so much like something about the game is changing that allows those guys to play in a different way. I just think kind of across the sport, this extends beyond edge rushers, there is a little more like different body types can play a little bit more at every position in a way that maybe just was not as true about the sport 25 years ago.
I think that's a really, really good point. If you look at it, there were only, I'm going back to, I'm at 2010 right now, okay? In 2010, there was only one defensive end at the entire Combine who was shorter than 6'3". the ways that we're just talking about edge rushers now, there's so many more players who are these tweeners that are going to be guys that measure a little bit less arm length wise because they're just shorter players.
That's such a good point, because even, the first time I covered a draft cycle was 2013, I think. And like even back then, you're writing off guys where it's like, he's only 6'2.5". Like what's he going to do for you down on the edge? And I mean, certainly over the last decade or so, I don't think that's nearly as much of a conversation as it used to be.
All right, Beller, what's the next one?
Okay, some metal dude has a fun proposition for us. He says, you are hired to be the head of all things NFL jerseys for every team, and as such, you are given 3 assignments. Give one team's kit complete protection. Love that we're taking the soccer style of this. You give one team's kit complete protection. In other words, they have to keep it for all time. Number 2, immediately banish one team's kit for it to never return. Number 3, bring back one team's kit from the past for them to use instead. And he specifies not like the Eagles Kelly Green as like a throwback we wear it 1 week, but something that they wear as their regular kit, jersey, all that good stuff. Let's snake draft this. Dave, you take this one first again.
I love this question so much. I campaigned to put this in the show because I love it so much. So you want me to do all 3 of mine first? Or are we gonna,
why not?
Okay. I think the very best uniform in the NFL, and it's a shame that it hasn't been associated with more good teams over the last quarter century. You're not beating the Raiders. You're not beating the classic black and silver with that logo. Just, the autumn wind is a pirate. It's like one, and you're going to see a theme here. I'm a uniform traditionalist. Like, I enjoy the Penn States and Alabamas of the world. I don't need a whole lot of rigmarole. So I absolutely adore the Raiders uniform. I would never touch it. Number 2, this is a pet cause of mine that I've always wanted to say into a microphone, and now I get my chance. I can't think of a worse uniform to be associated with the greatest run in the history of the sport than the Patriots uniform. It is insulting to me that a dynasty that spanned 2 decades has that ridiculous Flying Elvis logo with those huge, ugly shoulder stripes and the red face masks. I hate everything about the Patriots uniform, and it upsets me that like such great teams were accomplishing so much great stuff in such a ridiculous look. I would make them go back to their throwbacks immediately.
Because their throwbacks are fantastic.
Their
like
throwbacks
the old logo
rule.
and everything, like their
throwbacks are incredible. It pains me that we've seen so much dominance in such a bad uniform. And then finally, take your pick. Either the Dolphins or the Broncos, both. Their throwbacks are so much better than what they wear these days.
There are 10 candidates for this.
Yeah, for sure. But those are the 2 that come to mind. All the Dolphins need to do is go back to the throwback they wear like once or twice a year, and they'll have one of the best uniforms in the sport. And I would say, not that Denver's current logo with the horse head, like, it's not bad, but I like the throwback that much better.
The ones that are the easiest, like nudge back to being correct, are the Dolphins and the Falcons.
Falcons.
Those are the ones where it's just like, you just nudge it right back, and it's just not hard to get where you need to go.
That was also on my short list. I'll go in reverse order here. For my throwbacks, I had basically the same answers as Dave. Like the old, to me specific, I think kit top to bottom, like helmet all the way down to socks. The Broncos one is probably my favorite, but I love the old Dolphins logo. It just was, it had like a perfect amount of whimsy to it that it was phenomenal.
He's wearing a football helmet. Dolphins don't wear football helmets.
Dolphins don't wear football helmets. How ridiculous is that? And so they're my favorite. And then I think their color scheme is just like that blue and orange is fantastic. So I would say that one kid that's got to go. Like everything about the Titans for like the majority of the time that they have existed, I do not love. Especially the new ones they're rolling out now are offensive.
You don't like the new ones?
No, I think they're offensive.
Okay.
I agree. My answer was the current Titans uniforms, not because I don't like them. They're better than the old Titans uniforms. They should not be allowed to use that color scheme. You made your choices.
Yes.
You're opening a can of worms here. I mean, I don't think you're wrong.
But yes, no, he's correct. Like you have to live with the choices you made. You don't get to do this. And so for that reason, even if they're not like technically the worst uniform right now in the league, we're killing those for that reason. And then the ones that I would protect forever, Dave, the Raiders were on my short list. They might even be number 2 for me if I really had to like rank it out. Number 1 for me, the Ravens black and purple is just like sensational.
This is some
and I don't
Gen
think they're
Z
ever going to.
bullshit.
It's
the
so
idea
good,
that the
dude.
Ravens black and purple jerseys
Ravens
are the
black
ones
and
that need
purple
to be
are
protected
unbelievable.
is the
They're so
Ravens
good.
I was born after 2000 thing you could
And
possibly say.
I was born the year I think that they became a franchise. So
Oh my god. The Ravens uniforms are good, but like they're so 90s. Like the flying animal head and like purple and black. Like they're not bad, but they are just a product of their time. Like it's very easy to be like, "Oh, you came into being in 1998. This makes sense."
and they're
Yeah, I
perfect.
like them, but the idea that like we must protect the Ravens purple jerseys is some funny shit.
Listen, 30 years from now, I'll be right.
I'll say this. I'll start with the ones that we need to get rid of. My answer was the new Titans jerseys, just because I just don't think they should be allowed to have them. From last year, the jerseys from last year that was like, we can't keep doing this, was the Falcons. And they're switching out their uniforms this year. It was time. Like those ATL ones underneath the collar, like those were bad. And so I think they knew that.
Has any division over the last 10 years been worse than the NFC South? Like the alarm clock Bucks were bad. The Saints have had some gnarly ones. Like the NFC
The
South
Saints
has been disgusting.
the Saints alternates that they wear are often
Horrible.
ugly. Like there's so many bad Saints alternates, but overall I'm fine with the
Wait,
Saints.
wait,
Yeah,
wait,
that's
wait.
true. Yeah.
Okay, the Saints
Base
black
Saints is
helmets. The
Yeah,
Saints
base
black
Saints
helmets
is
or
good,
whatever.
sorry.
But like the Saints like color rushes that they wear, where like the all white is like as
The
good
all
as it
white is
gets.
good.
I'm okay with that. I just don't like the Saints black helmets. I don't like the
No,
white.
they're not
The
good.
whites are okay. I do not like the black helmets. And
No,
so
they're
there
not
are
good.
enough like alternate Saints uniforms that I'm just not a fan of. I don't like the gold numbers on the black, like the super gold numbers, like the pea colored gold numbers. Those are not my favorite.
Oh yeah.
But so those are just the alternates though. Like that, it's whatever. The one that I don't find any, with Derrik mentioning the alarm clock jerseys, I don't find any current NFL uniforms as offensive as some of the other ones that we've had over the last 10 years. So I think it's harder to find a good answer. I think the Patriots is actually a really good one. The Patriots needing like a total revamp. I'm 100% on board with that. The ones I would protect, the Packers and Steelers can never change their uniforms.
Agree.
Like
Yeah.
that's one where we could just have those forever. It's the same as the
Okay.
Raiders.
What do you think of the Packers white helmets though? Like I wouldn't want them to wear those all the time, but I like those. Like when
Those
they
are
mix
fine.
it up a couple times.
The
Those are
Packers
fine.
whiteouts are incredible because I'm with you, Dave. Like Penn State's, like that's a clean look. Anytime a team rolls out like the Stormtrooper jersey, I'm all about it.
I'm okay
Give
if
me
a
a-
team has an alternate every once in a while, but like
Mhm.
those teams that have had those classic uniforms, they have to keep those uniforms forever.
Primary colors, simple logos. I some people think it's boring, but I just think you can't go wrong.
That's how I feel. I mean, the Bears blue jerseys, I would never want those to change from like being like just the standard ones. Like I would want those forever. For me, the ones that if I could change one, or bring one back, I love the Seahawks throwbacks. Like I love the primary blue Seahawks throwbacks with the silver helmets. Like I think those uniforms are incredible. And so that's the only team we hadn't mentioned yet that I would throw in there. And I think the Kelly Green Eagles too. Like those, I would prefer the Kelly Green Eagles all the time.
We got to
I
throw
will
the
say-
Seahawks back to the AFC West if they bring the.
I support
right.
that.
The Seahawks throwbacks are awesome. And maybe it's just because they've had 3 or 4 really kick-ass teams, but this modern Seahawks uniform era with like the navy and the action green and the checkerboards on the numbers, like it's really grown on me. Like you win 2 Super Bowls in a uniform template, I'm listening. Like I don't want them to get rid of that completely. Where I'm like, yes, that is now an undeniable part of the identity of the Seahawks. I would be sad if they got rid of it completely.
It's a really good argument. I think it's the best argument for keeping it. I think that has overshadowed the actual quality of the uniform. I don't think the uniform is good, but I think because they've been so successful in it, now we're tied to it forever. All right, what's the next one, Bar?
Okay, this one is from 374 on Discord. 374 says, can we measure how good an organization is at drafting by knowing how many players they drafted are on NFL rosters, be it their own or somewhere else? If so, who grades out highly here? Or does this show that they are better at development, or I guess worse if those players stick in the league somewhere else? As an example, in 2024, there were 4 or 5 centers who played on teams, and they had all been drafted by the Cowboys. So, Derrik, what do we think about this one?
This one is really difficult to untangle. I would say that just purely basing it off of like, do these guys stick in the NFL? I don't think that works for like every round of the draft. I think that's a good way to do it if we're judging like rounds 4 through 7, maybe even 3 through 7, just guys who are like, okay, they can stick around. And so if we're judging it off of that, that's fine. But I think you can look at some classes like, I'm going to take the 2021 Jaguars, for example. They draft Travis Etienne, Tyson Campbell, Walker Little, Andre Sisco. If you look at like weighted approximate value on Pro Football Reference, they're all decent. Like Etienne's at 33, Tyson Campbell 25, Walker Little 18, Andre Sisco 20. These are all guys who have started a lot of football games. They've played for a while, gotten second contracts for other teams and stuff like that. But the only one that is still on the roster is Walker Little, who was extended by the previous regime and like never really started before he even got extended. This was like we don't even like the guy who's ahead of him, so we're going to keep this guy and let him play. And so that's one of those ones where it's like, sure, these are all NFL players. How much did they ever really do for you, really? And so that's why I think just basing it off that can get a little bit complicated. And then even going back to the Ravens, who we just talked about, they've got a lot of those guys where it's like,
they're number one by a lot.
Yeah, they're number one by. If we're judging it off of that, like, can they just identify guys who can hang? It's the Ravens, but that's not always the question when you're trying to do that.
I think at least I weight it differently across the front and back half of the draft too. I mean, let's just be honest. Like I'd say you could even talk me into the value of a 4th round pick, but really the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds, those picks are just not valuable enough for an NFL team to have too much patience or runway with you. It's like, okay, jump onto the moving train, and if you do, that's great, but we don't have a lot of time to wait around. Like I think in this day and age, most teams are going to try to give all of their draft picks like a rookie training camp to make the team. And I think that's not a hard and fast rule, but like as a rookie, you're going to try to keep as many of your draft picks as possible. But then after that, it's how well are you picking it up? How quickly are you adjusting? How do the coaches see you as a fit? What does the depth chart look like in front of you? Are you going to get an opportunity? Did somebody else break onto the scene? Like did the 2nd round pick from 2 years ago finally have the light come on, and now the depth chart is a little bit more crowded than it was when you got drafted? And it's tough to hold like a 5th through 7th round pick to that standard, whereas rounds 1 through 4, these are the guys that you have really identified and put weight on, and they're the ones that you need to hit. I am judging you based on whether those guys stick on your team and do something for you. If you got to cut your 6th round pick after his 2nd training camp because time waits for no man and he becomes a great player for somebody else, that's a cool story. I don't know how much credit I think you get for that, though, you know?
I go back and forth on this. I think there is an argument that it is a good measure of just the ability to identify NFL level talent throughout the draft. And I think that the Ravens are a good example of this, right? Like the Ravens have players that they drafted in like the 5th round of some of these drafts, the 6th rounds of some of these drafts, where they've been able to stick in the league for a really long time. And I think there's something to that, right? Like you look at the Ravens draft history over the last like 10 years, and some of the guys that come to mind when like in this exact discussion, Darren Waller was a Ravens draft pick, you know, sorry, I had other ones. Jermaine Illuminor was a Ravens draft pick. Bradley Bozeman was a Ravens draft pick. There are a lot of guys, Ben Powers, Geno Stone, Ben Bredesen was a Ravens draft pick in the 4th round. Like they've done a very good job of just being able to identify all throughout the draft that this guy can play in the NFL. And I do think there's a ton of value in that. But what this doesn't account for is, I don't think the idea of, is this a sign of development? I think it's the opposite of that. I think if your draft picks are doing well elsewhere, it's a sign that you picked the right players. Maybe you weren't able to develop them in the right way within your system and for your team. So I think it is a good measure of drafting quality. The only problem here is it's not a measure of impact because this doesn't account for scale. Right? Like in something like this, the idea that Ben Bredesen is still in the NFL matters as much as what Kyle Hamilton is. And so the impact overall and like the scale of how much and how good some of these draft picks are, we have to take that into account. Like it's not just how many singles you hit. The home runs matter very much in measuring overall draft quality.
This makes me think of a very specific story that always comes to mind when I think about this stuff. I guess it was probably 2018. The Cowboys identified an undrafted free agent by the name of Charvarius Ward. And they found him and brought him in, and he was having a nice rookie training camp. And like at a preseason game, they pulled him off the field and told him they were trading him to, I think he started out in Kansas City, right? Yeah, they traded him to Kansas City for an offensive lineman. The offensive lineman got hurt. I don't even remember his name. He wound up playing no meaningful snaps for the Cowboys, and Charvarius Ward goes on to become an all-pro and a good player for several different NFL teams and makes a ton of money, unmitigated success story. And it's like, that's really cool that you were able to identify that guy, and like you were right to prioritize calling him after the draft. But what does it mean for the Dallas Cowboys? And I mean, I think you're right. Like it's an impressive, good, reliable ability, but I don't know. I don't know how much credit I'm giving the Cowboys for Charvarius Ward kicking ass after getting dealt out of town.
Because development matters and utilization matters and having a plan for a guy matters. But in terms of being able to purely identify draftable talent, I do think that is indicative of something. And I do think that often over time, it will stack up in ways that you want it to. The team right behind the Ravens in this exercise is the Niners. It's a lot of really good teams at the top of this in terms of who has the most players on NFL rosters.
It sets a baseline. If most of your worst draft picks are guys who can at least stick around, that means you're more likely than not a lot of your good ones are going to end up being guys who are high impact players. Because like, think about, again, like part of the reason the Browns have stunk at drafting for the last 10 years or so is they do miss on a lot of their premium picks, but like they've also hit on a lot of those. The reason they have been bad for a lot of this time is if you look at their like rounds 4 through 7, it's a lot of guys who are just like cut immediately. And like that's kind of how you end up being like one of those franchises who really, really get stuck.
I also think the first Ravens conversation, the second Ravens conversation, what's the difference between the Ravens recently and the Browns? The Ravens make a lot of picks.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, it is still incredibly valuable to make a shitload of draft picks.
Thank you for reminding me of that, Robert, because it was a point I wanted to make during the Ravens thing, which is like we say all the time, like bad process can lead to good results and vice versa. I think part of the reason people are enamored with the Ravens so much is I really do think the process is undeniably good. Like give yourself as many bites at the apple as humanly possible. I always want to be making more draft picks than anybody else. And over Eric DeCosta's time as GM, they've averaged 9 picks per year. So like they've averaged 2 more picks than their allotment per year during his time as GM. And not every pick has been good. I'm sure they would redo some things, but give me as many bites at the apple as possible, and I'll take my chances that I'm eventually right.
Yeah, it's easier to find Isaiah Likely in the 4th round when you have 6 4th-round picks. Because that's how many they had the year they drafted Isaiah Likely.
Silly.
All right, Ballard, what's the next one?
Okay, Stoli on Discord asks. Stoli also in parentheses has Nagy Truther wants us to know that that's part of the personality here. So Stoli says,
I have so many questions.
It's a there are dozens of us situation. I think
he's a Giants fan, just for the record.
Oh,
yes,
okay,
that is
fine.
true.
Okay, all right, great. That's
gonna
more
play
fair.
It's going to play into this question, too. So, Stoli says, one of the coolest things about football is the wildly different body types and skill sets that play the same sport, or on the field at the same time, and even occasionally play the same position. What are some of the all-time great teammates that played the same position with drastically different body types or play styles? And here comes that Giants fandom. He included as an example Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw. Super fun question. Robert, what do you got here?
My all-time example is I was standing on the sideline at training camp in Nashville. I don't know what year it would have been. Probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And Derrick Henry was standing next to Dion Lewis. And I was like, this is a beautiful sport.
That's amazing.
I love it so much. Everything about the fact that these two guys could exist on the same field, playing the same position, doing the same thing, is one of the reasons that this is the greatest game in the whole world.
Is that maybe the position where you can kind of get the most?
Yeah,
like,
I think
probably is, right?
Receiver, right? Like in theory, you could have like
right.
you could have a 5'8" receiver and a 6'6" receiver on the same team. Like that's also something you could do.
So a cheap one that immediately came to my mind was like the 2007 Patriots having Wes Welker, who was like 5'9", 180 pounds, and also Randy Moss, who was Randy Moss. Like that's different players playing the same position technically.
For the same reasons, the late era Russ Seahawks with 5'10", 180-pound Tyler Lockett and 6'3", 230-pound DK Metcalf.
That's a great one.
Yeah, there's so many good examples. Like, and it's just Ted did a good job of this. Ted Nguyen this week on The Athletic wrote a story about this draft class, the 2026 draft class, and how stacking receivers next to each other overall is ridiculous. Like, it's why are we comparing? Trying to think of the best example. Who's like a small jitterbug receiver in this draft that I should be talking about?
I mean, Casey Concepcion is kind of like that.
No, Casey Concepcion's like a real outside receiver who's like the
but he's
like Branch, right?
Oh,
Dion
Branch
Burks.
is a perfect one. Or Burks,
Dion Burks.
Yeah, like Dion Burks compared to like Denzel Boston. It's like those guys are. We don't have to compare them as players. Like, we can compare the Denzel Bostons, the apples to apples and the oranges to oranges.
The all-time best one, Robert, you reminded me of this with the Derrick Henry shout. And like they were college teammates. They weren't teammates in the NFL, I don't think. Or actually, were they? No, they weren't. But the photo of like Mark Ingram went back to do the coin toss at Bama for one of the national title games, like after he was a pro. And he's at midfield with Derrick Henry. It's like a meme now. Like Mark Ingram out of uniform standing next to Derrick Henry. And Mark Ingram is 5'9", 220. Like, he's not a small dude, but he looks really small standing next to fully uniformed Derrick Henry. It's one of my favorite photos.
All right, one that is right and ripe for the Athletic Football Show. Headline plays. How big is too big? There's a lot of sizes on the show, and for good reason. But at what point across different positions are you starting to get or completely out on a guy? I mean, Derek, you have to take this one first.
I will. I feel like I'm the chief sizist guy on this show, so I'll start. It would take us a while to go through every single position, but I feel like a good benchmark for every non-trench position. Once you get to like 6'6", you're probably pushing it. And like there can be a couple of exceptions, but like you're pushing it at that range. It's the you can be too tall to play quarterback bit that you've done. Like, you kind of can be. And I think once you get past that, you're pushing it a little bit. Same is kind of true of wide receiver. Like, at a certain point, if you're too tall, probably a little hard to like get down and sink and get in and out of your routes, like certain stuff like that. Same obviously is true of like corner, safety, all that stuff. So that's probably the range there. Trench, I think it's more about weight, because there are plenty of guys who are 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", all that sort of stuff, and they can hang in the NFL. I feel like once you get to like 360, you're really starting to get into dangerous waters. And there are a couple of outliers, obviously, like Trent Brown was over this. He ended up being a good player. Orlando Brown, I think, was over this and ended up being a good player. But you're treading in some pretty dangerous territory once you push past 360.
Those are the two things that I had. Like, at 6'6", over 6'5", you're a tight end. You're not a receiver anymore. And the big offensive linemen, the massive offensive tackles, I think that's one that wouldn't concern me.
My only addition to the conversation, I just came down with the Supreme Court definition of pornography. Like, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. I just feel like you can tell watching a guy if he's like too big to be doing what he's doing. And like, even I was curious, just going back and looking, even at like 6'5", I would like to see a freakish degree of athleticism to want to bet on like a 6'5" guy. And there's plenty of those, right? Like Calvin Johnson comes to mind, but he was a generational prospect. Like, if like I want to see something special to believe that you're going to buck that trend, typically, like after a certain size threshold. And yeah, I would say 6'5", 6'6" is where I start to get curious.
I think that's actually a good way to frame it, because it's like, is your frame the attraction here, or is it like amazing that you can move the way that you do at that frame? You know what I mean? Like, if we're just being like, oh, he's 6'7", 350, that's crazy. But it's not like oh, he's so good athletically at that size. Like, that, I think, is the you know it when you see it kind of part of the element.
All right, Bauer, what's the next one?
Okay, this is from Jonathan. Don't call me Lars Ulrich. Maybe he would like that. Maybe he could be a big Metallica fan. So, Jonathan, do call me Lars Ulrich. Says, I have heard you guys talk multiple times about edge players that are labeled as more of an ideal number 2, like Montez Sweat. Which got me thinking, how many actual number one pass rushers are there? I would assume it isn't anywhere near 32. Is there a clear line of demarcation somewhere? And can you put together a list of your true number one pass rushers? Robert, why don't you take this one?
Try to do both of those things. My true number one guys that I had going through the list, I'm sure I might be missing someone because I was trying to stack it up with a couple different things. It was contracts and it was production last year. And so there might be somebody who hasn't gotten paid or somebody who was hurt last year that I might miss as part of this list. But I had I think 10 guys. So Myles Garrett, Will Anderson, and Danielle Hunter. So the Texans have 2. Micah Parsons. I still have Trey Hendrickson as a number one edge rusher when he's healthy. I think it's probably closer to the line now, but I'm still giving him the benefit of the doubt. Aiden Hutchinson I'm throwing in there. Jared Verse I think is still in there. TJ Watt, if you look at the attention that he gets, I'm still putting TJ Watt in that conversation. Max Crosby, Nick Bosa. So how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I had 10 guys who I think are true number ones. And I actually do think the market has done a really good job of sorting out where that line of demarcation is. If you look at the contracts that have been handed out and what guys are getting paid, I think right now the line, if I were to draw it, Jalen Phillips is the start of the second tier of guys at that $30 million a year. And then you look at the players paid right under him, Josh Hines-Allen, Brian Burns, Montez Sweat, Nick Bonito, that feels right. It seems like the market has that is shaken out in the way that it should shake out.
So that's interesting because I think a couple of those guys are I would probably put them slightly above the line. I think Josh Hines-Allen probably clears it to me. And
he's
I do think
right there. And after last year, I think you could make a strong argument that he belongs in tier 1. But I think that's right where you're having the discussion.
Way. Yes, exactly. And I do think this also gets down to a little bit of are we talking purely as pass rushers or number one, all around defensive end, which maybe changes the math slightly on some of these guys. But I do think that around Jalen Phillips is the line because Phillips I would put under it. But Josh Hines-Allen, who's right in that tier, I would put just above it and probably give him the doubt.
I think that's fair. And I think after last year, maybe Josh, because I think he got paid before last season. He got that contract, I think, in 2024. And so after last season, I think you could make an argument that Josh Hines-Allen belongs above the line with those other guys.
I got to tell y'all, I'm really encouraged to hear this because I think of myself as the more forgiving of the three of us. And I was expecting both of y'all to be there are 4 and only 4.
I did have a tier of 4 that's kind of the 1+ tier. You know what I mean? And then I got some other guys in there.
It's similar to quarterback in the sense, and Robert alluded to it, but there are just so many variables that make it hard to make a hard and fast list. Trey Hendrickson is a perfect example, but also I'm not willing to write off Nick Bosa as having elite edge rusher gas in the tank, even though he played 2.5 games last year. So I would throw Bosa and Hendrickson in there. And then at any given time, there's 3 or 4 guys that could ascend onto that plane for a season or a stretch of a season. Josh Hines-Allen is worth a mention. Jonathan Grenard was banged up, but he's certainly on the low end of that. Nick Bonito deserves to be mentioned. And he's top of mind because he just made a shitload of money, but Trayvon Walker is continuing to ascend as an edge rusher as well. I know he's not a pure sack getting edge, but he is still a really, really good, still ascending player, in my opinion. So, I'm not going to argue with you if you say 10. If you want to be a little more forgiving and say 12 to 14, I'm okay with that too.
That's about where I sit with it. And I think Josh Hines-Allen is a good one, Derek. I think he probably deserves the nod. But other than that, I think all of those guys fall just below that line to me.
Yeah. I will say the one that I think is most interesting because he was only a rookie, obviously, where Abdul Carter, he's probably the trickiest one to rank because you only have 1 year to go off of, and the run defense is more tackles for loss than setting the edge. But I do think that he's the one that if you're trying to project who's going to jump into that tier next year, it's probably him.
It's just too early. Right.
It's just you don't want to. You don't do it off 1 year unless it's Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett as a rookie, you were well, that guy's a little bit different.
Jared Verse's rookie year was enough for me to be he's probably in there. I think that's the other guy. As a rookie, I was yep, done. I'm all set here. All right, Bell, let's do one more.
Yeah, here's the last question. This is from Dan. Now, Dan is comparing Kenyon Sadiq as the top 10 tight end in this year's draft class, you guys, to the wide receivers that we've been talking about as we lead up to the draft. And so his email lays that out and then takes it to the current state of wide receivers and tight ends in the league and says, how far down the top wide receiver list would you have to go before you say, I'd rather have someone like Brock Bowers or Trey McBride than this guy, than this wide receiver? And wants us to answer that through a lens of when does the top tight end in the draft class start to measure up with a group of wide receivers? So what do you got on this one, Dave?
Am I being too mean if I say I got like 15 names down the list of receivers before I was starting to think about it?
Oh,
Like,
I knew this was going to go this way because I've got about a third of that.
Maybe I'm too fantasy football pilled. I don't know. Or maybe, again, the most recent season weighs so heavily. Like Trey McBride was incredible last year, but Brock Bowers obviously was banged up. He didn't have anything resembling his rookie year. But I don't know, man. I look at it. I look at what receivers are doing for their offenses, the scoring potential that they have. And I mean, I don't know. Should I list them off? Like I got Chase, Puka, JSN, Jefferson, CD, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Amon-Ra, Drake London, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, Pickens, T. Higgins, Teteroa McMillan. And I'll even I love Garrett Wilson. I threw him in there too. And I'm just
that's
all right.
why I think we get silly times.
No, I know you hate Garrett. You hate Garrett Wilson.
Give Garrett Wilson a quarterback with a pulse. Let's revisit this conversation.
He's a good player, but I'll even say this: like, you guys know how much I love Teteroa and McMillan. There are 4 or 5 tight ends I would rather have before Teteroa and McMillan, and he's awesome.
Really?
But
really?
Probably.
Going forward for the next 5 years?
Probably. I guess if we're going forward for the next 5 years, that probably changes the math. But Trey McBride certainly, Brock Bowers certainly. If you could tell me even for the next 3 years, I'm getting the best of George Kittle, which I'm probably not given his injury history. But if we're talking about who is changing their offense and who really gives you stuff, peak George Kittle is all better than all but 4 receivers in the NFL right now.
So Kittle's an interesting answer.
Yeah, because it's different than McBride and Bowers.
As a multifaceted weapon, if we're talking about a tight end that gives your run game significant juice while also being a very real receiving threat, you could change my opinion. But if it's just if it's a souped up slot, big slot tight end who's primarily a receiver, I feel fine with my list of 15.
Yeah,
I'd probably get closer to 8 or 10.
I think that's fair. I think that's probably a more reasonable stance than what I have. 8 or 10, I think is good. Because that gets all of your true alphas, basically.
JSN, Puka, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, that's 6. AJ Brown, 7. Drake London, 8. Those are the ones where I'm absolutely, I think that those guys are above. Then I think the group that's slightly one step down from that we can go back and forth on is Olave, Nico Collins.
Shit, I forgot about Nico. That's an error on my part, but I would throw him on my list for sure if he's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably where I start going back and forth on it, and I think I can still get a few more receivers before I get to the tight ends. So my answer is probably 10.
See, I think if I really got down to actually having to make the decisions, I would probably get to 8. I think I had 4 where I was no doubt about it. I don't even think about it, which is Puka,
4.
JSN. Yeah.
This
Justin Jefferson.
is what I was
Jamar
expecting
Chase.
with the edge rusher question, where Derrick's actually there are only 6 good players in the NFL.
Listen, this is kind of how I think about receivers. And so that's the 4 where I'm no doubt about it. I don't even think about it. AJ Brown, if last year didn't happen, I think would also probably be in that tier for me, but just last year was so weird. And then you get to the tier of I think I would take them. I think I would take the receiver, but I'm not 100% sure, which is the Drake Londons, Amon-Ra, CeeDee Lamb is in there, Nico Collins is in there. For me, it's a lot of your X's. I think the one, and this actually goes back a little bit to like what I was saying about Amon-Ra St. Brown during all the Mekhi Lemon discussions. Like T. Higgins is probably in this category for me because like I just think X receiver like that is very, very difficult to find. So he's probably one that's like a weird one for me to pick between. But then that's kind of where it stops for me. Like Devonta Smith is an awesome player. Chris Olave is an awesome player. I would much rather have the best tight end in the league than a guy like that.
Let me ask you this because I think it might be more interesting. How many tight ends are you putting in the mix for this conversation? Like McBride and Bowers kind of goes without saying. Colston Loveland's first season makes you lean in that direction, but maybe it's a little too early to say something.
We
that
didn't
bold.
include Colston Loveland. I would have Colston Loveland above everyone except JSN and Puka.
Colston Loveland's they're already doing his bust. We understand that.
I'd rather have Colston Loveland right now than Jamar Chase. Like I don't think that's even like that. At this point, I mean, like what he's giving you all across the board, it's like I don't even think it's a conversation.
I mean, I unironically would put Colston Loveland like disturbingly high on this list, probably.
You're not wrong. It's just too early. Like, yeah, sure.
And I get that.
I feel that way after 1 year, but it's 1 year.
I mean, let's go back and watch what the 2025 season was. I think I can make a pretty serious argument that Colston Loveland is better than Justin Jefferson.
That is technically that is how the second half of that year definitely played.
There's a kernel of truth in every good joke. That's the funny part about this. Yeah, but like, I don't know, man. Outside of,
I think it's those three and Kittle. Like Kittle, if I guess if you're doing again the 5 years thing, that complicates it a little bit. But if you're saying like the next 2 years, I do think like Kittle I would want in there.
What if I gave you Tucker Kraft fully healthy week 1?
Oh, Kraft is a good answer if he's healthy, for sure.
I think that's where it becomes the most complicated because I think Kraft is fantastic. I think he's not. Man, that one actually is tough because that one is like I would want to see what it looks like in an offense that throws more, and like I think that he is obviously very capable of that, and like being closer to like what Trey McBride is capable of on a volume sense. It's just like we're never going to get that in Green Bay, and so there is some element of me that's like kind of want to see it, even though I do think he's exceptionally talented.
Derrik is the unreliable narrator when it comes to this question.
Mm-hmm. Listen, you're telling me to pick between the like 190-pound receivers and the 250-pound like freak tight ends? Yeah, come on.
You're just asking him to choose between all of his children here as he rejects the small people. All right. That is all we've got for this go around with the mailbag. Sincerely appreciate everyone who sent in questions. I will not be on next week's mailbag, so these guys will be doing the heavy lifting, which I sincerely appreciate. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions. It's why we do this every single week in the off season. Always a fun time. We will be back tomorrow as we keep running through our 2026 NFL draft coverage. See you guys later. Thanks for watching. Follow The Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.